An interesting story. Washington, D.C. enacts the most comprehensive trans sanctuary bill in the United States. Washington, D.C. Democratic Mayor Muriel Bowser signed Act 240808, better known as the Human Rights Sanctuary Amendment, on November 21st. The amendment, shared on Twitter by trans activist Aaron Reed, aims to uphold various rights to those who are either transgender or wish to have an abortion within the region. Reed's tweet said, quote, "They can't use any means to enforce anti-trans and anti-abortion laws against people fleeing states. No cops, no jails, no warrants, no subpoenas, not even ink to paper." The bill, initially introduced in May, aims to prevent district officials from cooperating with interstate investigations that would infringe upon the exercise of reproductive freedom, end quote. It was sponsored by Washington, D.C. officials after the controversial Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade, which essentially gutted nationwide protections on abortion. During the July testimony in the District of Columbia's committee, Attorney General Carl A. Racine said, quote, "The Supreme Court overturned a precedent that had stood for nearly half a century, then eliminated the constitutional right of abortion. The sanctuary bill and related pending legislation seeks to bolster the district's long-standing policy of protecting civil and human rights. This includes the rights of making pregnancy decisions, access gender-affirming medical care, and engage in same-sex relationships," end quote. Activists applauded the bill, saying it will effectively turn Washington, D.C. into a human rights sanctuary. And I hope it's the prototype of many more laws like this. Individual cities that pass this kind of legislation that say we will not cooperate with enforcement measures from other states is the way to protect minority at-risk communities, especially like the trans community and what we're watching from states like Florida. Governor DeSantis cannot chase somebody into the District of Columbia to enforce the rules or laws that he tries to enforce here.
So will this pass? Do you think this will pass?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, whether we'll see it continue in other places will be, I hope so. I hope it becomes a prototype for other laws across. One of the things I love here, Al, you kind of point to that, is like reproductive rights have always been LGBTQ rights. And one of the things that this points us to and kind of reminds us too is that control of your body, agency over your body, and not being told how to dictate, to have control of your body is a form of liberation. It's a form of self-governance, like that is to have the own say in your body, and to put these two things together, they've always been critically linked. I think this is powerful. I think this is a really important message.
And it's not that surprising that this, the Human Rights Sanctuary Amendment Act happened in DC, because you really will not find a more Democrat voting area than in DC. And the credit also goes to City Council member Brienne and Nadeau, who actually created the bill.
And we should remind everybody, Washington, D.C., people think of South Florida, they think of Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York. Actually, the highest density LGBT in America is the District of Columbia, highest percentage.
And they have a great LGBTQ plus community down there, welcoming, inclusive, fantastic. Now, do we see a lot of LGBTQ folks going to DC because of this particular bill? Do you think that will happen?
Well, we're starting to see in terms of trans in Texas that, if you can believe it, there's someplace even worse than Florida, and that is Texas. We're already seeing anecdotal reports, both in terms of trans protections, healthcare, parental rights in Texas, and abortion issues, where they're exporting out of the state of Texas, even in relocating. I've read a number of stories about families that have moved out of Texas because of trans issues. Francesca, I've got to ask you, of course, you're just, as Fay indicated, this winner of trans advocacy. You're the award winner at at Transgender Awareness Week and the awards that took place. What is your reaction in terms of creating a sanctuary zone that basically says under no circumstance can anything, even pen to paper? I think that those are brilliant words because it says don't even write it down in terms of your pursuit because we're going to protect against it.
Well, I think this model is absolutely amazing and necessary. And as you had pointed out, I hope that this model crops up in other states, and that, you know, there's in numbers you can really outdo a lot of things. So, yeah, and as a trans woman, I can understand what cis women have to go through because it's the same thing. My body, my choice, my right. Back off, government. So, you know, it's crazy we're going through this in 2022. I just have to really pinch myself. So.
You know, one other thought that Julio opens the door for, you add to it, that I want to draw some attention to of what's going on in the District of Columbia. I'm constantly aware of white, gay, privileged man syndrome here in South Florida. I talk about it a lot. We've talked about it before the show.
You look at it in the mirror every morning.
I look at it in the mirror every morning. But it's interesting to me that these kind of discussions find an intersection of multiple communities in our LGBTQ community. Abortion rights for women, trans rights for our trans community, hormone therapies for minors decided on by with parental consent.
Abortions for trans men that could also have the need for an abortion.
Exactly, right. and even don't say gay. These all intersect with each other, and I think one of the moments that we should make sure that we draw attention to in this story in the District of Columbia, they're getting there faster than we are, and they are.
And one of the things that, as you know, as we were hearing the story, is that it's really clear where it takes its cue from. That is, like, the idea of a sanctuary city. There's a long list of sanctuary cities for immigrants and refugees. Like, that is, like, the idea of a sanctuary city and a sanctuary space has a long, decades-long history of protecting people fleeing persecution and discrimination based on their nationality and race. So that is, like, the kind of idea of imagining LGBTQ sanctuary even owes itself to immigrants. And
but you even see, like, a DeSantis throwing a bunch of LGBTQ plus people on a bus and sending us over to Washington, D.C.
Well,
when he becomes president, maybe.
We can't hold anything past DeSantis. One other interesting thing that Julio opens the door for that we don't mention in terms of protection in Sanctuary City. The example that Julio gave, we saw a very clear example of that in history, and it is 1939 to 1945 of Jews, religious persecution that was catastrophic persecution, and the sanctuary was not a city, but it was a nation, and it was called the United States. And that's exactly what we did. And Washington is ahead of us. This is a super interesting story that we should stay on top of. LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure the growth of the entire LGBTQ plus community.